The title of this book, Grace, the Power of the Gospel, it is written by our beloved brother Andrew Womack. We are in chapter 8, part 3. Chapter 8, part 3. We are dead with Christ, but living with Him is dependent upon what we knew. Knowing that Christ being raised from the dead, die no more. Death had no more dominion over Him. Romans chapter 6, verse 9. It's knowing again. As these two verses, we believe that we shall also live with Him, knowing that if you don't know this, if you aren't really established in it, then you won't experience that resurrection life, victory, and power that belong to us. You have to know that Christ being raised from the dead, die no more. Death had no more dominion over Him. Most people understand that Jesus isn't struggling with sin. He is not up there denying Himself and trying to put down His all sin nature. With Christ, that's over with. Christ is now completely holy and totally pure. In that He died into sin once, but in that He lived into God. Romans chapter 6, verse 10. Again, that's talking about Jesus. Most people will agree with that, but look at what the next verse says. Likewise, and God, in the same manner, reckon ye also yourself to be dead indeed into sin, but alive unto God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Romans chapter 6, verse 11. What a strong statement. You need to see yourself dead to sin the same way that Christ is dead to sin. Do you think that Jesus still has an old sin nature plus a new or righteous nature on the inside of Him? And He is struggling between the two? Of course, no. Jesus is dead to sin. He is no longer dealing with any propensity, sin nature, or actual sin drive. He took that into His own body and suffered for it. It is dead, buried, and gone. We need to see ourselves just like Jesus, resurrected into new life in God. Let not sin reign. Arm yourself likewise with the same mind, for he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1. Arm yourself likewise with the same mind, for he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1. Some people cheat that this means the more you suffer, the more it breaks the dominion of sin in your life. That is certainly not true. Some of the people who have suffered the more are some of the greater sinners. This really means that Jesus, the one who suffered on the flesh by taking our sin into His own body on the cross and died for us, has ceased from sin. Sin has no more dominion over Him. We need to arm ourselves by getting the same mind that Jesus now has towards sin. He is not relating to sin. He doesn't feel like a part of himself is bound by nature to sin. He certainly knew better than that. So, But 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 1 and Romans chapter 6 verse 11 tell us we need to have this same attitude as Christ towards sin. Here's the result of this attitude. Let no sin, therefore, reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lust thereof. Romans chapter 6 verse 11, verse 12. Let no, this means that you do have the power to stop sin. Denounce sin from reigning in your life. Let no, this means that you do have the power to stop sin, denounce sin from reigning in your life. The sin nature itself is dead and gone, but it is up to you whether you let it continue to reign through the body, prayer, programming it, or left behind. Don't let the tendency you have towards sin because of an renewed mind reign in your mortal body. Since the word commands you not to do this, this shows that you do have the power to deny sin the right to reign in your life. No, under the law. Not under the law. Not under the law. Neither yield ye your member as instrument of unrighteousness into sin, but yield yourself into God as those that are alive from the dead, and your member as instrument of righteousness into God. For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. Romans chapter 6, verse 13 to 14. The law was not given to break the dominion of sin, but to give sin dominion over us. The Lord strengthened sin. God, 1 Corinthians chapter 5, chapter 15, verse 56. The Lord made sin revive and come alive in God, Romans chapter 7, verse 9. The law actually empowers sin because sin was already present in the sin nature. People were deceived, thinking if I just quite living in the action of sin, then I will be okay. Even if they could do that in court, which they couldn't, and limited the number of sin action they commit, and somehow or another felt good about themselves, they still couldn't change their sin nature. It was still there. God did not strap Adam and Eve with a bunch of rule and regulation. He gave them freedom. God did not strap Adam and Eve with a bunch of rule and regulation. He gave them freedom. It might be a little bit dormant. It might float over by all of this good work being done. But the truth is that we can change our nature just by acting good. So the Lord had to bring us out of this deception. How did He do it? He started saying, "Thou shalt not." Then when we hear a commandment not to do something, we lust to the very thing we were forbidden to do. As a kid, how did you get somebody to do something they didn't want to do? You just say real sarcastically, "You can't do it." What are you? What are you? Chicken. You seriously, I bet you can't do it. The moment you tell someone they couldn't do it, they break their neck trying. Back in my running day, I was competing in a 6.2-mile race. When I was about a quarter of a mile from the finish line, this other runner started to pass me. I tried to keep up with him, but I was out of jaws. I had turned in a personal record and just didn't have anything left. This girl could tell I tried to keep up with him. He looked back over his shoulder and said very sarcastically, "You can't do better than that." Once he said that, it's like I turned into the Incredible Hulk. My afterburner kicked in and I beat him in the last quarter mile of that race by 100 yards. I don't know where that strength came from, but there is just something about someone telling us we can't do. We can't do something that make us want to do it. We didn't produce our sin nature, and we certainly can't produce our new nature. We didn't produce our sin nature, and we certainly can't produce our new nature. Most of us have probably experienced something similar to that. There is just something inside us that goes off when we hear "thou shalt not" and causes us to respond, "Bless God, I shall." Something inside us just reacts because God didn't create us to be dominated by rule and regulation. God did not drop Adam and Eve with a bunch of rule and regulation. He gave them freedom. When the law came, its purpose wasn't to break sin's dominion over your life. Rather, it was to illustrate, here, you are hopelessly bound to this sin nature. You can't change yourself just by improving a bit. You need help, and to prove it to you, I'm going to show you what's in your heart. Thou shalt not commit adultery. All of a sudden, sin revived and you began to lust for everything God told you not to do. While listening to my teach on this subject, a man decided to check this out for himself. In his backyard, his son and some friend had been playing well for over half an hour. So he walked up and told them, "Hey kids, you are doing great, but whatever you do, thou shalt not spit on this floor." Then he went back into his house and looked out the window. Half the kid went right over and spit on that floor. The other just stood there with their mouth open and rolling, which meant they had enough never to spit on the floor. They immediately lust for the thing they were commanded not to have. But under grace. That is what the Lord did. It actually gave this sin nature, dominion over us. It made sin, non-sin, come alive and begin to lust for everything we were told we couldn't have. The purpose was to bring us out of our deception and recognize that even though we might have overcome individual act of sin, that sin nature was still there. We were by nature children of the devil, and the only way out of it was to receive a brand new nature. And that's something we can produce. We didn't produce our sin nature, and we certainly can produce our new nature. We must receive it as a gift from God.